The video game industry is filled with a lot of rumors. Recently, rumors have found their way to the Legend of Zelda series, insisting that the fabled Ocarina of Time is soon to receive a ground-up remake. Oh boy, are you sure you want to do that, Nintendo? I mean, Ocarina of Time is one of the most beloved video games ever made. Where do you even begin? What changes? What stays the same? How can you possibly remake what many consider to be perfect? It's only within the last decade that video game remakes have really started to become commonplace. I'm not talking about a port or low-effort remaster, those have been around since the dawn of time. I'm talking about a true recreation of what came before. This could come in the form of Bluepoint's Shadow of the Colossus, which remakes every art asset but leaves the core game unchanged, or Capcom's Resident Evil remakes, which change just about everything. The cynic would claim that we're seeing more and more of these because the industry is running out of ideas, but it makes sense when you really think about it. The fact of the matter is, video games age a lot quicker than virtually any other entertainment medium. A classic from 30 years ago may be borderline unplayable today. Which brings us to Ocarina of Time. Originally released in 1998, this very game is pushing 30, so before we dig into whether or not this game should be remade, let's look at what a remake could tangibly improve. Ocarina of Time was one of the first true 3D adventures. Plenty of 3D games had come before, but none had pulled it off quite like this one. Perhaps the biggest mechanical innovation was Z-targeting, which found a way to make combat fun with the extra dimension. Overall, the game is still very much playable to this day, something that can't be said for many of its contemporaries. This longevity is a testament to its quality, but what could be possible with a modern control scheme? We saw some of these possibilities come to life in Ocarina of Time 3D, released in 2011, but a new version on Switch 2 would surely push the envelope even more. Dual analog camera control, a revamped inventory system, a fresh engine, the possibilities are endless. These nuts and bolts may not be the most exciting elements, but they're vitally important nonetheless. Of course, if you're like me, one of your first thoughts when hearing about this potential remake is what it would look like. The original, of course, shows its age, so a remake released in 2026 would, of course, look much better, but there's more nuance here if we dig a little deeper. The last time we saw a 3D home console Zelda game with the traditional dungeon structure was Skyward Sword. Zelda was brought into HD with Breath of the Wild and Tears of the Kingdom. They're absolutely a step up from what's come before visually, but they also feature massive open worlds, which led to frame drops, pop-in, and a general reduction to visual fidelity relative to what would have been possible with a smaller game. Ocarina of Time, for as long as it is a much smaller game, which should give Nintendo a chance to really make it shine. Add to that the fact that it's likely being built from the ground up on Switch 2 means that this Ocarina remake should be easily the most visually impressive Zelda game ever made. Enough about presentation though, what about content? As I mentioned, there are various levels of video game remakes, with some purely cosmetic in nature, only intended to give the game a facelift, as it were. Maybe that's what this remake will be, but let's think bigger here for a few minutes. This is a chance to make some true transformations. I just mentioned the traditional dungeon structure to which Ocarina adheres. You know what I'm talking about. You explore, progress the story, eventually find a dungeon, play through it, get a new item, kill a boss, heart container, rinse, and repeat. Many Zelda games have adopted this structure, and for good reason. It's a lot of fun. It feels distinctly Zelda, with any other game that attempts it immediately drawing comparisons. The question is, would an Ocarina remake maintain this structure, or adopt something new? The aforementioned Breath and Tears have both shifted to an open world structure, predicated on player choice. You don't have to do almost anything as long as you find a way to defeat the ever-present Ganon. Many love this new structure, many hate it, but could it possibly impact a modern Ocarina? The original game features the overworld of Hyrule Field, with various enclaves branching off of it, like Kokiri Forest, Death Mountain, or the castle itself. There's a fair bit of freedom on display, but many areas can't be accessed until a specific item is acquired, and the dungeons themselves feature almost no flexibility in their completion order. Zelda's recent explorations beg the question, should Ocarina adopt a more nonlinear approach? Link could tackle dungeons in a more flexible order. Late game areas could be accessed earlier. Maybe you just start with every item at the beginning of the game. I can hear the collective groaning, and I'm mostly kidding here. I don't suspect we'll see a fundamental reinvention of how this game is structured. If it ain't broke, don't fix it, but that doesn't mean that there isn't room to learn from what's come after the original version. For example, one of my favorite elements of the modern era of Zelda is how movement functions. Link can climb on just about anything, which means that if you see something, you're likely to be able to reach it. A stamina meter imposes some limitations on the player, so you can't go anywhere, at least early on, but this ability injects a whole new level of freedom into the game. Maybe this could work in Ocarina. You'd certainly have to draw a line somewhere. You might not want Link climbing too high, but I don't know, maybe we would. It's hard to know without seeing it in action, but there's some undeniable potential here, at least in my opinion. I will say, for as much as I've taken to the more recent Zelda games, there's one element I really hope doesn't make an appearance in an Ocarina remake. I love Breath and Tears, but one of my least favorite components of both of them is the story, and more specifically, the voice acting. It just doesn't work, man. I'm not criticizing the voice actors, they're doing their best, it's the writing. So many of the lines feel straight out of a Saturday morning cartoon and feel completely anathema to the quiet beauty these games display when you're actually playing them. Now, that's not to say that the writing in Ocarina of Time is any better, but it's not voiced. This means that you can insert your own inflections and voices as if you were reading a book. Nintendo, more than perhaps any publisher, has held on to text-based dialogue, and while many scoff at this, I think it tends to be for the best. Part of why this story has aged so well is that it doesn't feature goofy, over-the-top performances. Words alone have carried stories for hundreds and hundreds of years. I think this is a particular realm where it's actually best to just embrace the past. It's not just about changes to an existing mechanic though, it's about additions, maybe about subtractions. Capcom's Resident Evil remakes are perfect examples of this. They're not one-to-one remakes of the original game. They introduce new scenarios not seen previously, but also, importantly, remove content that the developer deems antiquated or unnecessary for whatever reason. It's hard to move my brain out of the box that is the existing Ocarina framework because I'm so incredibly familiar with it. But what if its version of Hyrule was transformed? What if Hyrule Field were massively expanded with new areas to discover? What if an entirely new dungeon were introduced, outfitting Link with a new item? What if? Some of this may sound sacrilegious, and I understand that perspective. Again, Ocarina of Time is nearly unrivaled in terms of the passion that surrounds it. People love this game. I love this game, but isn't that all the more reason to take some risks? The original game's not going anywhere, we've still got that to fall back on, so why not push the boundaries a little bit? A new coat of paint is great. I love seeing a modernized version of a game not so easy on the eyes originally, but with a remake as major as this, what's the point in just making changes at a surface level? Let's swing for the fences here. Now, there is another piece to this conversation. Last month, I finally played the remake of Resident Evil 4. The original version of this game is actually in contention with Ocarina for my favorite video game ever. I'd been saving the remake for years, incredibly excited to play it, and it was finally time for me to jump in. The game is, without question, awesome. It honors the original, but like we've discussed here, isn't afraid to make both additions and omissions. Mechanically, it's a massive step up, allowing the player to move and shoot at the same time, introducing a light stealth system, and making enemies more dynamic. It would be easy for the layperson to look at both versions and declare the remake to be objectively superior, and yet, throughout my entire journey with the game, something was wrong. Something was off. As I played through the game, I kept finding myself comparing each moment to that of the original. Generally, the game did a fantastic job of delivering fan service and subverting expectations, and yet I kept thinking back to that 2005 original. You can improve every mechanical element in the book, but at the end of the day, each video game presents a completely unique atmosphere. No two games are the same, it's like a fingerprint. Some games have incredible atmosphere, others not so much, but what's interesting is that the game only has so much control over it. Sure, a horror game is inclined to impart a spooky vibe, but both versions of Resident Evil 4 possess that spooky vibe, and yet, I massively prefer the atmosphere of the original. Another game with impeccable atmosphere, The Legend of Zelda: Ocarina of Time. On an atmospheric level, I can count the games able to compete with Ocarina on one hand. For a remake to match this kind of accomplishment seems nearly impossible. Of course, for me at least, atmosphere is inextricably linked with another phenomenon: nostalgia. Oh, that nostalgia! Let me paint you a picture here. I first played the original Resident Evil 4 in March of 2009. I was 13 years old. It was one of the first mature-rated games that my dad had ever let me buy. I got the Wii version for 20 bucks. I remember that it was a 3-day weekend. No responsibilities, so man, I just demolished that game. I couldn't stop playing it. I was in awe. It was one of the seminal gaming experiences of my life, and I'll never forget it. Most importantly, I was completely, utterly immersed in that game. Not another thought in my mind except for the dread of having to go back to school on Tuesday. Let's compare that to my context of playing the remake, and I've been reflecting on this a lot lately. Here I was, March of 2026, 17 years later, I'm now 30 years old. I'm playing through this game, but I'm not completely immersed. Instead, I'm mourning the loss of a friendship that I cared a lot about. I'm stressing about how much money the YouTube channel is gonna make this month. I'm still processing the trauma of losing my job a year ago. I'm lost in a lot of thought that didn't plague me when I was 13. Back then, my biggest worry was if my mom had remembered to restock the Pop-Tarts. Life was simpler then. It was just simpler. I miss those days. Don't even get me started on my first playthrough of Ocarina of Time. I was even younger, 7 or 8 years old. I didn't even know what the word anxiety meant. It was pure bliss. How can you not love something unconditionally that you associate with such a happy time? A remake isn't just competing with the original game, it's competing against all the memories that are forever tied to it. You want to know something interesting though? While I was playing through the RE4 remake, I decided to pop in the original. I was struggling so much to be present with the new game, so maybe the old would help soothe my mind. It didn't work. My mind was just as plagued as it was before, which brought me to a sort of epiphany. These games that I love so much can awaken the memories of the good old days, but they can't bring the good old days back. That's sad. It makes me sad. But maybe accepting that can enable me, or all of us, to embrace the new a little more openly. This realization is sobering, but let me present a lighter realization I've been having as well. Nostalgia may be confined to the past, but I don't think it's confined to childhood. The Evil Within, for example, elicits incredible nostalgia for me, but I was in college when I played that game. Some of my favorite games have been played throughout my 20s. What's important to note though is that I wasn't in a great place mentally when I played a lot of those games. I had a litany of other struggles specific to those chapters of my life, and yet I feel nostalgic for those days. I can only hope that one day down the line, for as much as I was struggling as I played it, I'll find nostalgia for the Resident Evil 4 remake. Maybe the memories of the game can transcend the real-life struggles that surrounded it. Maybe it's impossible for the maybe not even real Ocarina of Time remake to compete with the original. But maybe, if we can open up our hearts and minds to the idea, this new version of a classic we already love can carve out a unique connection all its own. For all I know, if I'm lucky enough to have kids someday, this remake could be for them what the original was to me. There may always exist a melancholic allure to return to the past, but let us not forget that tomorrow holds the memories we'll one day cherish. And hey, if all else fails, we've always got our Ocarina of Time.